Welcome to the Internet, your gateway to adventure.
The following is an excerpt from a journal found in a burnt-down rehabilitation center in an undisclosed location of England. The contents contains sensitive information regarding a particular person, so it may not be divulged to those unqualified to view it. Please keep this material safe and away from any that may seek to use its information for harmful purposes. And please do not distribute the information without consulting the proper authorities. Curious I was, as they dragged me before the cold stone cells. I remember seeing the grey jumpsuits of the others as they lined up against the bars, glaring at me hungrily. I was to be the new meal, fed to a pack of rabid wolves, until I would be left naught but a lump of flesh, cradled by my captors until fit enough for the wolves once more. My cell arrived quickly, though it was to discern it from the row of identical concrete walls and iron bars. The sole difference? Mine was soulless, lacking the stereotypical tally of days spent here or collection of posters or books that explored subjects far too provocative for the male sex drive in such an androtic location. I did not intend to decorate my residence with such decor. Instead, I intended to keep it dull, as it was to be a reminder of my sins. My sins were simple. I stole from a fellow man. I needed the money, as they all say, and saw no better opportunity than when he had suffered some kind of stroke or heart attack and collapsed. Police had come rather quickly, and the brutality of my capture felt rather extreme. Nevertheless, I was guilty of a crime I had committed, and there would be no better way to serve my time. My first surprise came from that of my apparent neighbor, a hoarse voice with little to no emotion in it, leaving each sentence a trail of horrible repetition. "So you're the new guy. What did they bring you in for?" Are the only things he'd ask me. Of course, I responded with silence, a shockingly welcomed response. For the first week I was there, he never once relented. It wasn't until about halfway through the second week that I had experienced a change in his behavior. In the middle of the night, I woke up with the sound of extremely loud banging. Yet no matter how I complained, the guards never claimed to have heard a thing. This continued so often that on the night it ceased, I actually found myself feeling more uncomfortable than when it had been occurring. Instead, a new terror had arrived, an intercom system for communication with all prisoners. My first experience of the dreaded device came in the early hours of the morning. A cold, distorted voice called out to us about meal pills, the perfect alternative. My hatred towards them became more and more unwarranted as I soon realized that they were making me feel better, though I was no longer able to recall how I had been feeling before. Still, some supplements were brought to us. There was the occasional small meal that must have been almost pure fat, as I was certain I had gained weight since taking the pills. I eventually made the correlation between the pills and my weight gain. The guards must have been trying to make us fat in order to reduce how active and aggressive we could have been. It was funny when I realized it, though, because not once had I seen other inmates acting at all out of place. Once I stopped taking the pills, I began to revert back to how I had been before. I'm feeling I can recall better now. It was anxiety, lingering constantly at the back of my mind, telling me that the gods spoke ill of me. At times, it even convinced me of the bad intentions that the others had for me. I tried to ignore it to the best of my ability, but without those pills, it never went away. Then he came back. For the first night in months, my cell neighbor decided to start banging again. It sounded like he was being thrown against the wall and floors. This time, I did little to evade the sounds, and instead listened intently. through the occurrence. Eventually, he fell still and silent, but not before giving one final crash against the wall that delivered with it the sound of splintering bone. Urgently, I called for the guards to see to his safety, but they stared at me like I had been the one in trouble. That's when the governor came to see me. Through the bars, he asked me what had happened while gesturing the guards away. Though my explanation was limited, he seemed to understand well enough and proceeded to open the cell door. "Tell me what you think of him," he told me, holding out his hand to give me support as I left my cell. I turned to see what had become of my neighbor, only to find myself staring at a white wall. Not grey like I had first seen. There were no cells besides my own, a fact I had been sure wasn't true for many months. "You're not well," the governor explained to me, resting his hand on my shoulder. "Do you remember why we brought you here?" he asked. I had stolen. I had committed a sin, I replied, feeling the anxiety growing, spreading, and infecting me. "What did you take?" He continued the questions, clearly determined to discover something. I can't remember what I stole. I think it was money, but I don't know anymore," I cried back. "You stole a life. Do you remember now? You beat him into a seizure and woke the neighbors with the noise," he explained. Speaking almost condescendingly now, I gazed at him and mustered with the dwindling sanity in me. "But why?" "That's what I'd like to find out," he said back, smiling, as he handed me the pen and paper. It seemed no matter how long I clawed at the memories, I couldn't find the cause of my actions. To me, they still felt so surreal. A murderer is not what I had thought myself to be on any level. But I had clearly fallen ill. The pills kept me going, clearing the fog of anxiety, but never once nourishing my strength. They had me trapped here for good, a position that left me feeling like a rat in a cage. Though I knew I was no longer food for the wolves, I was a toy of a much more sinister predator. It had me where it wanted, and no matter how violent I became, or how distressful my cries were, my deliverance would not be coming any time soon. That was until a thought had occurred in my nearly absent mind. Through the receding haze, new information was revealed to me, the actions of my victim prior to my frenzy. I recalled him welcoming me into his home, a small flat with little to no decorations or furniture. "I've just moved in. What do you think of the place?" his echoed voice asked me. Though the words I said were unclear, I knew that whatever I had said upset the man, and he proceeded to direct me out of his home. Before we reached the front door, however, I remembered turning to face him, pushing him backwards. Whatever happened after that became unclear, disappearing back into the haze. This didn't satisfy me, and it definitely wouldn't have satisfied those who held me here. It was a shame, then, that chance to hold me fell short, as one of the few guards that kept watch over my cell offered me a cigarette. What at first must have been a joke gave me the idea to insist that it would help me. He looked perplexed that I responded, and in an oddly calm fashion, he slid one to me through the bars in the door. "Alas, I have no means to light it," I said in a joking tone, trying hard to persuade him to trust me. Like a fool, he gave me the lighter, which I eagerly stole. His look of ease became inflamed in furious anger. as I had heard him banging on the door for the lighter to be returned. I, of course, did not oblige, as I had better use for it than he. Without the room for hesitation, I put the lightest flame to my bed, holding it there as the fire steadily grew, engulfing the room in black smoke and sweltering heat. Fire alarms began blaring off, and water sprayed down the hallways, but not in my room where the flames began to approach. Striking out haphazardly, a hand suddenly dragged me from the inferno, but I was ready to strike back, forcing myself away from the clutches of the guards and down the hall. As I ran, I heard the guards give chase, barking orders in frustration as I escaped their clutches. It all looked identical as I ran. Each corridor was pure white and had been flooded by the sprinklers. It wasn't until I had noticed the direction in which the water was running that I knew where I had to go. Eventually, I came to the stairwell that led to the lobby of wherever I had been brought to. As I reached the bottom, I was confronted by the man who had once been known to me as the governor, but no longer. I charged at him and threw us both through the front door. He struggled back against my weight, but it had been his doing, and now his undoing. As I clamped my hands like vices around his neck, something occurred to me as I laid there beside the governor's lifeless body. The eyes from which I had experienced the memory of the murder were not mine. I remembered at that moment that I had been watching from the doorway as my parents argued. They screamed at each other constantly until my mother lost control and killed my father. I wondered how my memory had been so scrambled, only now faintly recalling the treatment my mother had forced me into. Every word was said with a smile, but none of the words were innocent. I watch now from the outside as the fire rages beyond the power of the sprinklers, its calamity blackening the white walls, bricks collapsing as wood turns to soot and ash. Once the fire is finished, I will throw this into the embers, hoping that if it survives, someone